The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty road in Afghanistan's Helmand province. Sergeant Marcus Johnson adjusted his helmet and checked his watch. 800 hours. His convoy of 3 armored vehicles was scheduled to depart for a routine supply run to Forward Operating Base Delta, located 30 miles northeast through Taliban-controlled territory. The base had been running low on medical supplies and ammunition for weeks. Previous convoys had faced improvised explosive devices and ambush attacks along this particular route. Intelligence reports suggested increased insurgent activity in the region, but the supplies were desperately needed. Johnson had led similar missions dozens of times during his 2 tours in Afghanistan, but something felt different about this morning. As the convoy prepared to move out, Johnson noticed 2 German shepherds wandering near the base perimeter. The dogs appeared healthy and well-fed, unusual for strays in this war-torn region. Their coats were clean, and they moved with purpose rather than the desperate hunger typical of abandoned animals. One was mostly black with tan markings, while the other displayed the classic tan and black coloring of a purebred German shepherd. "Sir, should we do something about those dogs?" asked Private Williams, the youngest member of Johnson's unit. The 19-year-old from Ohio had only arrived in country 2 months earlier, and still showed concern for every civilian and animal they encountered. Johnson shook his head. "We've got a mission, Williams. Those dogs can take care of themselves." He had learned the hard way that in a combat zone, focusing on anything other than the mission could prove fatal. The sergeant had seen too many good soldiers die because they let their guard down or became distracted by seemingly innocent situations. The convoy began moving through the base gates at precisely 8:30 hours. Johnson's vehicle led the formation, followed by a heavily loaded supply truck, with another armored vehicle bringing up the rear. The route would take them through several known danger zones, including a narrow mountain pass where insurgents often positioned snipers and planted roadside bombs. As they drove through the village outside the base, Johnson observed the usual signs of a community caught in the crossfire of war. Children played in the dirt streets while their mothers watched nervously from doorways. Old men sat in the shade, their weathered faces showing the strain of years of conflict. Most buildings bore scars from explosions or gunfire, and many structures remained only partially rebuilt after previous battles. The convoy had traveled approximately 5 miles when Johnson noticed the 2 German shepherds again. They were running alongside the road, keeping pace with the vehicles despite the rough terrain. This behavior struck him as odd. Most wild dogs would either flee from the noise of military vehicles or ignore them entirely. These animals seemed to be deliberately following the convoy. "Sergeant, those are the same dogs from the base," observed Corporal Martinez, Johnson's radio operator. Martinez had grown up on a farm in Texas and possessed a natural understanding of animal behavior. "They're not acting like strays. Look how they're moving. That's trained behavior." Johnson studied the dogs through his binoculars. Martinez was right. The animals moved with military precision, maintaining formation and responding to each other's signals. Their alertness and coordination suggested extensive training. But by whom? No American or coalition forces in the area used German shepherds for military operations. The Afghan National Army occasionally used local dogs for security, but these animals displayed skills far beyond basic guard dog training. The convoy continued through increasingly dangerous territory. Johnson's radio crackled with reports from reconnaissance drones overhead, indicating possible insurgent movement in the hills surrounding their route. The intelligence suggested a potential ambush setup near Checkpoint Bravo, still 15 miles ahead. As they approached a particularly vulnerable stretch of road flanked by steep rocky outcroppings, the lead German shepherd suddenly stopped and began barking frantically. The animal positioned itself directly in the convoy's path, refusing to move despite the approaching vehicles. Its partner joined the demonstration, both dogs creating an unmistakable barrier. "What the hell are they doing?" muttered Private Williams over the radio. The convoy was forced to halt as the dogs continued their aggressive stance, barking and showing signs of extreme agitation. Johnson felt his combat instincts activate. In 2 tours of duty, he had learned to pay attention to unusual animal behavior. Dogs, especially intelligent breeds like German shepherds, possessed senses far superior to humans. They could detect explosives, hidden enemies, and other dangers that might escape human notice. "Everyone stay alert," Johnson commanded through his headset. Something's got those dogs spooked. He ordered his gunner to scan the surrounding area while maintaining a defensive position. The convoy's vulnerability in this location made him extremely uncomfortable. High ground on both sides provided perfect positions for enemy snipers or rocket-propelled grenade attacks. The dogs continued their frantic barking, occasionally running a few yards ahead before returning to block the convoy's path. Their behavior became increasingly urgent, as if they were trying to communicate something critical to the soldiers. Johnson had seen military working dogs exhibit similar behavior when detecting explosive devices or enemy presence. Corporal Martinez leaned forward in his seat. "Sergeant, I think they're trying to warn us about something up ahead. My grandfather's hunting dogs used to act exactly like this when they detected danger." Johnson weighed his options carefully. Military protocol dictated maintaining the mission timeline, but his experience suggested the dogs might be alerting them to a serious threat. The animals showed no signs of aggression toward the soldiers. Their entire focus remained directed at something ahead on the road. "Driver, hold position," Johnson ordered. He grabbed his rifle and prepared to dismount for a closer inspection of the area. The morning sun had climbed higher, creating harsh shadows among the rocks that could easily conceal enemy fighters or explosive devices. As Johnson stepped from his vehicle, both German shepherds approached him cautiously. They showed no fear of the heavily armed soldier, instead displaying behavior that seemed almost familiar. The lead dog, a magnificent animal with intelligent brown eyes, looked directly at Johnson and then toward the road ahead, as if trying to direct his attention to a specific location. The sergeant felt a chill run down his spine despite the rising heat of the Afghan morning. These were not ordinary stray dogs. Their training, their coordination, and their apparent desire to help American forces suggested something far more complex than a chance encounter. But what were two highly trained German shepherds doing alone in one of Afghanistan's most dangerous regions? Johnson's radio crackled with an urgent message from base command, requesting a status update on the convoy's progress. He knew that every minute of delay increased the risk of enemy detection and attack, yet something deep in his combat-hardened instincts told him that these dogs held the key to a discovery that would change everything he thought he knew about this mission. Johnson decided to trust his instincts and the dog's warning. He signaled for his explosive ordnance disposal specialist, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, to join him for a reconnaissance of the area ahead. Rodriguez had served 3 combat tours and possessed an almost supernatural ability to detect hidden improvised explosive devices. The 2 German shepherds seemed to understand Johnson's intentions. As he and Rodriguez moved forward on foot, the dogs flanked them like trained military escorts. Their behavior was so professional that Johnson began to suspect these animals had received formal military training from coalition forces. "These dogs know what they're doing." "Sergeant," Rodriguez whispered as they advanced slowly up the road. "Look at their positioning. They're maintaining a tactical formation." The explosive specialist had worked with military working dogs before and recognized the signs of advanced training. Approximately 100 meters ahead, the lead German shepherd stopped and sat down, staring intently at a seemingly innocent patch of road. Rodriguez immediately understood the significance of this behavior. Military working dogs were trained to alert in exactly this manner when detecting explosive materials. Rodriguez pulled out his metal detector and began sweeping the indicated area. Within minutes, the device began emitting the distinctive beeping that indicated buried metal objects. Further investigation revealed the outline of a sophisticated roadside bomb, carefully concealed beneath loose dirt and rocks. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez muttered as he examined the device more closely. "This isn't some homemade IED. This is military-grade C4 explosive, with a professional detonation system. The bomb was large enough to destroy the entire convoy and kill everyone aboard, but the discovery became even more disturbing as Rodriguez continued his analysis. The explosive device showed signs of American military engineering, specific components that were only available to U.S. forces and their closest allies. The detonation system used technology that insurgents should not have been able to acquire. Johnson felt his blood run cold as the implications became clear. Either American military equipment had fallen into enemy hands, or someone with access to U.S. supplies was working with the insurgents. Both possibilities represented a serious breach of security that could endanger every coalition operation in the region. The German shepherds remained alert while Rodriguez carefully documented the explosive device. They positioned themselves as sentries, watching for any approaching threats while the soldiers worked. Their professional behavior continued to puzzle Johnson. These dogs displayed training that exceeded most military working animals he had encountered. While Rodriguez worked to disarm the bomb, Johnson radioed back to the convoy with orders to maintain their defensive position. He couldn't risk moving the vehicles forward until the explosive threat was completely neutralized. The narrow road provided no alternative routes, and reversing through potentially hostile territory posed its own dangers. "Sergeant, you need to see this," Rodriguez called urgently. He had uncovered additional components of the explosive device that made the situation even more complex. Hidden beneath the main charge were sophisticated listening devices and cameras, equipment designed for intelligence gathering rather than simple destruction. Johnson examined the surveillance equipment with growing alarm. The devices were recording convoy movements, radio communications, and tactical procedures. Someone was collecting detailed intelligence about American military operations in this sector. The roadside bomb was not just an attempt to kill soldiers. It was part of a larger intelligence-gathering operation. The lead German shepherd approached Johnson and gently took hold of his sleeve, tugging him toward a cluster of rocks about 50 meters from the road. The animal's behavior suggested there was something else he needed to see. Johnson followed, keeping his weapon ready and maintaining radio contact with his team. Hidden among the rocks, Johnson discovered a camouflaged observation post equipped with high-powered optics and communication equipment. The position provided an excellent view of the road and would allow observers to monitor convoy movements while remaining completely concealed. Fresh food wrappers and water bottles indicated the position had been occupied recently. More disturbing was the discovery of detailed maps and photographs showing the locations of every coalition base in the region. The intelligence materials included information about supply schedules, patrol routes, and defensive positions that should have been classified. Someone with high-level access was providing sensitive information to hostile forces. Johnson photographed everything at the observation post while the German shepherds maintained watch. The dog's alertness and training continued to impress him, but also raised new questions. How had these animals learned to detect not just explosive devices, but also hidden enemy positions? Their skills went far beyond typical bomb detection or security work. Rodriguez completed his examination of the explosive device and reported his findings over the radio. "Sergeant, this bomb was planted by someone with advanced military training. The construction techniques and component placement show professional expertise. This wasn't built by typical insurgent forces." The revelation sent a chill through Johnson's team. If enemy forces had recruited personnel with advanced military training, or if coalition forces were somehow compromised, every operation in the region was at risk. The intelligence gathered at the observation post could be used to plan devastating attacks against American and Allied forces. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Johnson realized they faced a critical decision. The discovery of the bomb and surveillance equipment represented valuable intelligence that needed to be reported immediately to higher command. However, continuing with their original supply mission would expose them to additional unknown threats. The German shepherd seemed to sense Johnson's dilemma. The lead dog approached him again and began moving toward a different path that led around the rocky outcroppings. The animal's behavior suggested knowledge of an alternative route that might avoid additional dangers. Johnson studied his maps carefully. The path indicated by the dog was not marked on any official route, but satellite imagery showed it eventually reconnected with the main road several miles ahead. Using this alternate route would add time to their mission, but might avoid additional ambush sites. "Rodriguez, what's your assessment of moving through that terrain?" Johnson asked his explosive specialist. "The unmarked path could easily contain additional roadside bombs or lead them into a trap. With those dogs leading the way, I'd trust it more than the main road," Rodriguez replied. "They've already saved our lives once today. If they know a safer route, we should follow their lead." The decision to trust the German shepherds represented a significant departure from standard military protocol. Johnson was essentially allowing two unknown animals to guide his convoy through hostile territory, based on nothing more than their demonstrated intelligence and apparent desire to help, but everything about this mission had already departed from normal parameters. The sophisticated enemy surveillance operation, the advanced explosive devices, and the apparent security breaches suggested they were facing threats far more complex than typical insurgent activity. Johnson made his decision. He would trust the dogs and follow their suggested route while reporting their discoveries to base command. The intelligence they had gathered was too important to risk losing in another ambush, and the German shepherds had already proven their reliability by saving the convoy from certain destruction. The convoy carefully maneuvered onto the narrow mountain path indicated by the German shepherds. The trail was barely wide enough for their armored vehicles, with steep drops on one side and rocky cliffs on the other. Johnson maintained constant radio contact with his base, reporting their position and the intelligence discoveries to his commanding officer. The German shepherds moved ahead of the convoy, maintaining a distance of about 50 meters while constantly scanning for threats. Their behavior remained professional and alert, occasionally stopping to investigate suspicious areas before signaling the all-clear. Johnson had never seen animals display such sophisticated tactical awareness. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the landscape became increasingly barren and rocky. The altitude made breathing more difficult, and the vehicle's engines worked harder in the thin air. Johnson's radio crackled with updates from drone surveillance, indicating continued insurgent movement in the valley they had abandoned. "Sergeant Johnson, this is base command," came the urgent voice of Colonel Matthews through his headset. "We've analyzed the photographs you transmitted from that observation post. The intelligence materials match classified documents that were reported stolen from Phobie Charlie 3 weeks ago." The news confirmed Johnson's worst fears. Someone within coalition forces had either stolen the classified materials or was actively collaborating with enemy forces. The theft explained how insurgents had obtained detailed information about convoy routes, base defenses, and operational schedules. "Sir, what are your orders regarding our current mission?" Johnson responded. The convoy was now committed to the mountain path, but they could still abort the supply delivery if necessary. "Continue to FOB Delta as planned," Colonel Matthews ordered. "We need those supplies delivered, and your alternate route may actually provide better security than the compromised main road. But maintain maximum alertness. We don't know how extensive the security breach might be." The German shepherds suddenly stopped and began exhibiting the same alert behavior they had displayed at the roadside bomb. Both animals positioned themselves in front of the convoy and began barking urgently. Johnson immediately ordered a halt and prepared for another potential threat. This time, however, the dogs were not indicating danger ahead. Instead, they were alerting to something behind the convoy. Johnson's rear gunner reported movement on the main road far below. A group of insurgents was setting up what appeared to be an ambush position at the exact location where the convoy would have been traveling. There, positioning RPGs and machine guns right where we would have been in another 30 minutes, reported Corporal Martinez through binoculars. If we had taken the main road, we would have driven straight into a kill zone. The realization that the German shepherds had saved their lives a second time was both humbling and mystifying. These animals possessed intelligence and training that exceeded anything Johnson had encountered in his military career. Their ability to anticipate threats and guide the convoy to safety suggested knowledge that went beyond normal animal instincts. As the convoy continued along the mountain path, Johnson noticed additional evidence of recent human activity. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt indicated that other vehicles had used this route recently, despite it not appearing on any official maps. The tracks were too large to belong to typical civilian vehicles and suggested military transport. The German shepherds led them to a natural sheltered area where the convoy could rest and refuel without being visible from the valley below. While his team performed maintenance checks on their vehicles, Johnson studied the tire tracks more carefully. The tread patterns matched those used on American military vehicles, raising new questions about who else knew about this hidden route. "Sergeant, I found something you should see," called Private Williams from a position overlooking the main valley. He had discovered another camouflaged observation post, this one equipped with even more sophisticated surveillance equipment than the first location. Johnson investigated the new discovery, and found evidence of long-term occupation. The observation post contained sleeping bags, cooking equipment, and supplies that could sustain a small team for weeks. Most disturbing were the detailed logs recording convoy movements, timing, and defensive capabilities. The logs were written in English and showed intimate knowledge of American military procedures. Whoever was conducting this surveillance had access not only to classified route information, but also to internal operational details that should have been known only to command personnel. One of the German shepherds approached the observation post and began sniffing around a particular area with obvious excitement. The animal's behavior indicated the presence of something significant that the soldiers had missed in their initial search. Following the dog's lead, Johnson discovered a concealed cache containing advanced communication equipment, encrypted radios, and what appeared to be American military identification documents. The IDs belonged to soldiers from various units stationed throughout the region, including some who were supposed to be on active duty at distant bases. "This is getting bigger than we thought," Johnson muttered as he photographed the evidence. The cache suggested an organized network of compromised personnel, rather than a simple case of stolen documents. The scope of the security breach could potentially affect every coalition operation in Afghanistan. The German shepherds continued to demonstrate their remarkable training by maintaining security while the soldiers investigated. They positioned themselves as sentries and showed no interest in the food supplies the convoy carried, further evidence of their disciplined military training. As evening approached, Johnson faced another difficult decision. The evidence they had discovered was extremely valuable, but also dangerous. If hostile forces realized their surveillance network had been compromised, they might accelerate whatever operation they were planning. The convoy needed to reach Phobie Delta quickly to ensure the intelligence reached proper authorities. The lead German shepherd approached Johnson and exhibited behavior he had learned to interpret as communication. The animal moved toward a different path that appeared to lead more directly toward their destination. Once again, the dog seemed to know information about the terrain that was not available on official maps. "These dogs know this area better than our intelligence reports," observed Rodriguez. "They're guiding us around every threat and showing us routes that don't officially exist." "Where do you think they came from?" Johnson had been wondering the same thing. The animal's training, their knowledge of the terrain, and their apparent commitment to helping American forces suggested a connection to military operations. But no units in the region reported missing working dogs, and these animals showed skills that exceeded standard military training. The mystery deepened as they prepared to continue their journey. The German shepherds had not only saved their lives multiple times, but had also led them to discover a significant security breach that threatened the entire coalition effort in the region. Their timing and behavior suggested purpose rather than coincidence. As the convoy prepared to move out for the final leg of their journey to Phobie Delta, Johnson realized that delivering the supplies was no longer their most important mission. The intelligence they had gathered about the security breach and surveillance network could prevent future attacks and save countless lives. The German shepherds took their positions ahead of the convoy, ready to guide them safely to their destination. Johnson still had no idea who these remarkable animals were or where they had come from, but he was becoming increasingly convinced that their appearance was not accidental. Someone or something had sent these dogs to help his convoy, and he was determined to discover the truth. The convoy reached Phobie Delta just as the sun was setting behind the Afghan mountains. The base commander, Major Patricia Coleman, was waiting at the gates with several intelligence officers who had been briefed on Johnson's discoveries during the journey. The German shepherds had maintained their protective formation throughout the final approach, but now seemed hesitant to enter the military installation. "Sergeant Johnson, we need to debrief you immediately about these surveillance sites you discovered," Major Coleman said as she examined the photographic evidence. "This security breach is far more extensive than we initially realized. We've identified similar observation posts near 3 other bases in the region. The intelligence officers were particularly interested in the stolen identification documents found in the cache. Computer analysis revealed that several of the IDs belonged to soldiers who had been reported as killed in action or missing in action over the past 6 months. The documents were being used to create false identities for insurgent operatives attempting to infiltrate coalition bases." While the debriefing continued, Johnson noticed that the German shepherds remained outside the base perimeter, pacing nervously and occasionally barking softly. Their behavior suggested anxiety about entering the military installation, which seemed odd given their obvious comfort with American soldiers. "Major, those dogs that guided us here are acting strangely," Johnson reported. "They've been completely calm and professional all day, but now they seem afraid to come onto the base." Major Coleman looked through the gate at the two animals. "We've been receiving reports about stray dogs in this area for several weeks. Local villagers claim the dogs are looking for something or someone. Some of the stories suggest the animals belong to coalition forces." The mention of the dogs belonging to coalition forces sparked Johnson's curiosity. He requested permission to investigate further and was assigned a small team to help determine the animals' origins. The base veterinarian, Captain Sarah Mitchell, joined the investigation to examine the dogs and assess their health and training. As Captain Mitchell approached the German shepherds with food and water, their behavior changed dramatically. Both animals became extremely excited and began running toward a specific section of the base. They stopped at a memorial wall displaying photographs and names of coalition soldiers who had died in the region. The lead German shepherd sat directly in front of one particular photograph and began whining softly. The image showed a young army specialist named David Chen, who had been killed in a roadside bomb attack 3 months earlier. According to his service record, Chen had been a dog handler working with military working dogs in counterinsurgency operations. "That's Specialist Chen's memorial," Captain Mitchell explained. "He was one of our best dog handlers, but he died before we could investigate reports that his dogs had gone missing after the attack. We assumed they had been killed in the same explosion." The revelation sent chills through Johnson's team. The German shepherds were not stray animals. They were Chen's military working dogs, somehow surviving the attack that killed their handler and continuing to operate independently for months. Their sophisticated training and knowledge of the terrain suddenly made perfect sense. Captain Mitchell examined the base records and found detailed information about Chen's dogs, Kaiser and Scout. Kaiser was the larger, mostly black dog, while Scout was the classic tan and black German shepherd. Both animals had been specially trained for explosive detection and reconnaissance operations in the exact region where Johnson's convoy had traveled. Chen spent months mapping every trail and path in those mountains, Captain Mitchell explained. He knew routes that weren't on any official maps, because he had personally scouted them with Kaiser and Scout. These dogs have been continuing his work, even after his death. The emotional impact of the discovery affected everyone involved in the investigation. Chen's dogs had not only survived the attack that killed their handler, but had continued protecting American forces for months. Their intervention with Johnson's convoy was not coincidental. They were still performing the mission their handler had trained them to accomplish. Major Coleman reviewed Chen's operational records and made a disturbing discovery. The roadside bomb attack that killed Chen had occurred at the same location where Johnson's convoy had been scheduled to travel. The insurgents were using the exact same tactics and positions that had been successful against previous targets. Chen was investigating reports of intelligence leaks when he was killed, Major Coleman revealed. His final mission report mentioned suspicious patterns in insurgent attacks, and they seemed to know convoy routes and timing with impossible accuracy. The connection between Chen's investigation and the security breach discovered by Johnson's convoy was becoming clear. Chen had been close to exposing the surveillance network when he was killed. His dogs had somehow continued his work, using their training to protect other convoys from the same threats that had claimed their handlers. Captain Mitchell attempted to approach Kaiser and Scout with their original military equipment, specialized harnesses and communication devices that Chen had used during operations. The dogs immediately recognized their gear and allowed themselves to be equipped, confirming their identity beyond any doubt. With their proper equipment, Kaiser and Scout demonstrated capabilities that explained their remarkable performance during the convoy mission. They had been trained to detect not only explosives but also electronic surveillance equipment. Their ability to locate the hidden observation posts was the result of months of specialized training with Chen. Johnson felt a profound respect for the dedication these animals had shown. After losing their handler, they had continued protecting American soldiers despite having no human guidance or support. Their loyalty and training had literally saved his convoy from destruction. The investigation into Chen's death was reopened based on the new evidence discovered by his dogs. The sophisticated surveillance network and the stolen identification documents suggested that Chen had been specifically targeted because his investigation was getting too close to the truth about the security breach. Intelligence analysis of the observation post revealed that the surveillance network had been responsible for numerous successful attacks against coalition forces. The insurgents had been using real-time intelligence to plan ambushes with devastating accuracy. Chen's dogs had helped uncover one of the most significant security breaches of the entire Afghan conflict. Major Coleman made the decision to formally reactivate Kaiser and Scout as military working dogs. Their knowledge of the terrain and proven abilities made them invaluable assets for continued operations against the surveillance network. They would be assigned to a new handler and continue the work that Chen had started. As the evening progressed, Johnson watched Kaiser and Scout interact with the soldiers at FOB Delta. The dogs had accepted their return to military service but still showed signs of grief for their lost handler. Their dedication to protecting American forces, despite their loss, was both inspiring and heartbreaking. The convoy's mission had evolved from a simple supply delivery into the discovery of a major security breach and the recovery of two heroes who had been protecting coalition forces from the shadows. Johnson realized that Chen's dogs had been guardian angels, continuing their handler's mission long after his death. The investigation into Specialist Chen's death and the surveillance network intensified over the following days. Kaiser and Scout were working with a new handler, Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, who had extensive experience with military working dogs. The animals adapted quickly to their new partner, but their behavior suggested they were still mourning the loss of Chen. Intelligence analysis of the evidence discovered by Johnson's convoy led to a shocking revelation. The security breach involved at least 3 coalition personnel who were providing classified information to insurgent forces. The stolen identification documents had been used to create false identities that allowed enemy operatives to access multiple bases throughout the region. Major Coleman assembled a joint task force to investigate the compromised personnel and dismantle the surveillance network. Kaiser and Scout were assigned to lead reconnaissance missions to locate additional observation posts and gathering sites used by the insurgent intelligence operation. These dogs know the enemy's patterns better than our intelligence officers, Staff Sergeant Santos reported after their first joint mission. They're leading us to locations that we never would have found through traditional surveillance methods. The German shepherds guided the task force to 7 additional observation posts over the next week. Each location contained sophisticated equipment and detailed intelligence about coalition operations. The scope of the surveillance network was far larger than anyone had initially suspected, covering an area of over 200 square kilometers. During one reconnaissance mission, Kaiser detected the scent of explosives at what appeared to be an abandoned village compound. The building showed no obvious signs of recent occupation, but the dog's alert behavior indicated a significant threat. Explosive ordnance disposal specialists discovered a massive weapons cache hidden beneath the structure. The cache contained American military equipment that had been reported stolen from various bases over the past year. Included were advanced communication devices, night vision equipment, and weapons that should have been secured in coalition armories. The discovery provided additional evidence of the extensive security breach. Scouts' specialized training in electronic detection led to the discovery of a sophisticated command center hidden in a network of caves. The facility contained computer equipment, satellite communication systems, and detailed maps showing the locations of every coalition base in Afghanistan. The intelligence operation was far more advanced than typical insurgent activities. Most disturbing was the discovery of real-time communication logs showing that the insurgent network had been monitoring coalition radio communications and predicting military operations with remarkable accuracy. They had access to encrypted communication channels that should have been impossible for enemy forces to intercept. The investigation team found evidence that the compromised coalition personnel were using their access to download classified databases and transmit information through hidden communication networks. The security breach had been ongoing for at least 8 months, allowing insurgents to plan devastating attacks against American and Allied forces. Johnson was assigned to work directly with the task force, using his knowledge of the surveillance sites to help identify patterns in the enemy intelligence operation. His respect for Kaiser and Scout grew as he witnessed their continued dedication to protecting coalition forces despite the trauma they had experienced. Chen trained these dogs to think like intelligence analysts, observed Captain Mitchell during one of their briefing sessions. They're not just detecting threats, they're understanding and predicting enemy behavior patterns. The German Shepherds' knowledge of the terrain proved invaluable for understanding how the surveillance network operated. They guided investigators to hidden supply routes, communication relay points, and safe houses that connected the various observation posts. Their mental map of the enemy infrastructure was more detailed than satellite imagery. Staff Sergeant Santos developed a strong bond with Kaiser and Scout, but she recognized that the dogs were still processing the loss of their original handler. They performed their duties with professional excellence but showed signs of depression and anxiety that were affecting their overall well-being. The breakthrough in the investigation came when Scout detected human scent at one of the abandoned observation posts that matched scent evidence from the base where the classified documents had been stolen. The dog's tracking abilities led investigators to identify one of the compromised coalition personnel. The suspect was Staff Sergeant Michael Brooks, a communications specialist who had been stationed at multiple bases in the region. Computer analysis revealed that Brooks had access to all the classified information that had been found in enemy hands. His duty assignments coincided perfectly with the timeline of security breaches. When confronted with the evidence, Brooks confessed to selling classified information to insurgent forces in exchange for substantial payments. He had been recruited by the enemy network through blackmail after being photographed in compromising situations during off-duty activities in local villages. Brooks revealed that the surveillance network included 2 other coalition personnel and several Afghan translators who had been working as double agents. The operation was coordinated by a former Afghan military officer who had been trained by American forces before defecting to the Taliban. The investigation expanded to include locations throughout Afghanistan as the full scope of the intelligence operation became clear. Kaiser and Scout were deployed to multiple bases to help identify additional surveillance sites and security breaches. Their success rate in detecting enemy intelligence operations was unprecedented. The German Shepherds' work led to the arrest of all personnel involved in the security breach and the dismantling of the entire surveillance network. Their dedication to continuing Chen's mission had prevented countless future attacks and saved, potentially, hundreds of coalition lives. Major Coleman recommended both dogs for military decorations in recognition of their extraordinary service. The animals had demonstrated courage, loyalty, and intelligence that exceeded the performance of many human soldiers. Their story became legendary among coalition forces throughout Afghanistan. As the investigation concluded, Johnson reflected on the remarkable events that had begun with a routine convoy mission. The appearance of Kaiser and Scout had seemed like pure coincidence, but their intervention had uncovered one of the most significant security breaches in the history of the Afghan conflict. The German Shepherds had honored their fallen handler's memory by continuing his work long after his death. Their loyalty to Chen and dedication to protecting American forces demonstrated the extraordinary bond that can exist between military working dogs and their handlers. They had truly become guardian angels watching over coalition forces in one of the world's most dangerous regions. 6 months after the convoy incident, Sergeant Johnson received orders to return to the United States. His tour in Afghanistan was ending, but the memory of Kaiser and Scout's heroic intervention would stay with him forever. The German Shepherds had become symbols of loyalty and dedication throughout the coalition forces in the region. Staff Sergeant Santos had developed an exceptional working relationship with the dogs during their continued operations. Together, they had successfully identified and neutralized 12 additional insurgent intelligence sites, effectively ending the surveillance network that had threatened coalition forces for nearly a year. These dogs have capabilities that go beyond normal military training, Santos reported in her final assessment. They seem to understand strategic thinking, and can anticipate enemy behavior in ways that suggest almost human-level intelligence. The military recognized Kaiser and Scout's extraordinary service with the Animal Medal of Honor, the highest decoration available to military working dogs. The ceremony was attended by senior officers from multiple coalition nations, acknowledging the international impact of the dog's actions. Major Coleman presented the awards personally, reading a citation that detailed how the German Shepherd's intervention had prevented the destruction of Johnson's convoy and led to the discovery of a major security breach. The dog sat at attention throughout the ceremony, displaying the discipline that had made them legendary. During the medal ceremony, intelligence officers revealed the full impact of the surveillance network that Kaiser and Scout had helped uncover. The enemy intelligence operation had been responsible for 47 successful attacks against coalition forces over 8 months, resulting in 63 casualties and millions of dollars in damaged equipment. The investigation had led to arrests and prosecutions that extended beyond Afghanistan into international criminal networks. The security breach had involved arms dealers, corrupt officials, and terrorist organizations across multiple countries. Kaiser and Scout's work had disrupted a sophisticated operation that threatened global security. Johnson learned that Specialist Chen had been working on a classified investigation into suspicious patterns in insurgent attacks when he was killed. Chen's handler notes, discovered in his personal effects, revealed that he had suspected the existence of an intelligence leak months before his death. His dogs had been specifically trained to detect the types of surveillance equipment found in the observation posts. The tragic irony was that Chen had been killed while investigating the very network that his dogs would later help expose. The roadside bomb that claimed his life had been planted using intelligence gathered from the surveillance operation he was trying to uncover. Kaiser and Scout had essentially completed their handler's final mission. Staff Sergeant Santos made a remarkable discovery while reviewing Chen's training records. The specialist had developed innovative techniques for teaching dogs to detect electronic surveillance equipment, methods that were years ahead of standard military protocols. His training methods had given Kaiser and Scout capabilities that no other military working dogs possessed. Chen was a genius when it came to understanding how dogs could be used for intelligence work, Santos explained to Johnson during his final visit to Fob Delta. He saw potential in these animals that nobody else recognized. Kaiser and Scout are the product of his revolutionary training methods. The German Shepherd's success had led to changes in military working dog programs throughout the coalition forces. Chen's training techniques were being studied and implemented to create a new generation of dogs, capable of detecting sophisticated electronic surveillance and intelligence gathering operations. Johnson spent his final day in Afghanistan with Kaiser and Scout, walking the same mountain paths where they had first saved his convoy. The dogs remembered him clearly and showed the same professional alertness that had impressed him during their first encounter. Their bond with Santos was strong, but they still carried themselves with the quiet dignity of animals who had experienced profound loss. The local Afghan villagers had developed deep respect for the German Shepherds during their months of independent operation. Stories circulated about the mysterious dogs who protected coalition convoys and seemed to appear whenever soldiers were in danger. Some villagers considered them guardian spirits sent to watch over the foreign forces. Captain Mitchell provided Johnson with a final medical assessment of the dogs before his departure. Despite the trauma they had experienced and months of survival in harsh conditions, Kaiser and Scout remained in excellent physical and mental health. Their resilience and adaptability were remarkable even by military working dog standards. "These animals have shown us what loyalty really means," Captain Mitchell observed. They continued serving their country and honoring their handler's memory, even when they had every reason to give up. They're heroes in the truest sense of the word. The German Shepherds were scheduled to remain in Afghanistan for another 6 months before rotating back to the United States. Their expertise in detecting insurgent surveillance operations made them invaluable for ongoing security operations. However, arrangements were being made to eventually retire them to a special program for veteran military working dogs. Johnson's commanding officer informed him that his actions during the convoy mission and subsequent investigation had earned him a Bronze Star for valor. The citation specifically mentioned his decision to trust the German Shepherd's warnings and his role in uncovering the security breach that threatened Coalition Operations Act. Johnson prepared to board the transport aircraft that would begin his journey home. He reflected on how a routine supply mission had become one of the most significant events of his military career. Two remarkable dogs had not only saved his life, but had also taught him profound lessons about loyalty, dedication, and the bonds that exist between military personnel and their working animals. Kaiser and Scout watched from the flight line as Johnson's aircraft departed. Staff Sergeant Santos later reported that both dogs seemed to understand they were saying goodbye to someone important. They maintained their alert posture until the aircraft disappeared into the Afghan sky. Johnson returned to his home in Michigan with a new appreciation for the sacrifices made by military working dogs and their handlers. He became an advocate for veteran working dog programs and frequently spoke about Kaiser and Scout's heroic actions to veteran organizations and military groups. The story of the German Shepherds, who stopped a Marine convoy, became legendary within military circles. Their actions demonstrated that the bond between military working dogs and their handlers could transcend death itself. Kaiser and Scout had proven that loyalty, properly trained and deeply felt, could accomplish the impossible. Years later, when Johnson received word that Kaiser and Scout had been retired to a veteran working dog sanctuary in Colorado, he made the journey to visit them. The dogs were older but still alert and dignified. They remembered him immediately and spent the afternoon walking familiar trails with the sergeant whose life they had saved in the mountains of Afghanistan. The German Shepherds had completed their service with honor, having protected countless coalition forces and helped expose one of the most dangerous security breaches in modern military history. Their legacy lived on in the training programs they had inspired and the lives they had saved through their extraordinary dedication to duty.